here. Our cities are like ghost towns. There's empty buildings everywhere. The businesses are really struggling and it can feel unsafe when you're out and about. How are you actually going to level up in the north?
Esther.
Well, I think after lockdown and after COVID, there's definitely been upheaval and it's been tough for businesses. So we have got the levelling up agenda. Billions of pounds has come to Doncaster, or millions, I should say, in the levelling up fund and the towns fund. And that's really important that we do support our businesses. They are the energy of the economy. And for me, I was pleased with the autumn.
I think most people care about the fact that public services have been decimated, Esther, right? And again, a lot of people aren't investing in businesses in places where the public services suck, because that is like the bedrock of the economy, which you've destroyed by taking money not just out of the public services themselves, but out of the councils as well, right? Levelling up really and truly was just papering over the failures in local authority funding.
Statement that the Chancellor said we're going to do the biggest tax breaks in 50 years and we're going to support our businesses, because that is what we've got to do, particularly coming out of what has only been a terrible time for business with lockdown, COVID lockdown.
Colin, you asked this question. How does it feel to you?
It feels terrible. You just have to look around the high street. You've got Wilko's that's gone, you've had Debenhams gone, you've had multiple retailers, and those shop places are still empty and nothing seems to be happening. So
the money that's come from government, I think in total so far...
Imagine if there was extra local authority funding so they could take all these empty shop fronts and create something useful out of them. Like, what's frustrating is we always seem to believe that there can be this return to the high street of old. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that world's gone. It's not coming back, right? You can order things cheaper and more efficiently and quicker online than you would get if you were shopping in a high street store, right? The high streets that we knew and we not loved but had a complicated relationship with for all of those decades, those are a thing of the past, and we're going to have to think of a different model for how our high streets are going to work moving forward.
Apart from various different funds, not just the Levelling Up Fund, it's just over 60 million. Do you feel that's made a difference?
I don't think so. Things seem to be getting worse and nothing seems to be happening up in the north. The money still seems to be getting spent in the south.
Steve?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in 2019, when this government was first elected, levelling up was supposed to be their big idea. And admittedly, look at what they've been doing before that. They'd hardly levelled the country up, had they?
Well, Boris Johnson defined it as his defining mission.
He did define it. That's exactly what he called it. But what they've...
And this is the thing, right, is that at least Boris Johnson recognised that change was necessary, right? Revitalisation was necessary, at least as a political tool, even if he didn't actually intend on delivering it. Right? Even if he didn't intend on delivering it properly, there needed to be some level to which that the austerity status quo had to be upended somewhat, which is why it's even more frustrating that Labour are kind of wanting to go back to what we had before the pandemic, which everybody hated and nobody liked, and nobody wants to vote for. They just feel like they have to get the Tories out, which is kind of miserable in terms of what we're looking at as far as choices for the next election. Two people offering change, whilst changing back from some sort of change to what we had before 2020, right? Which is incredibly miserable. But it is worth pointing out is that, the money might actually be there, right? The money that's been provided by the Levelling Up Fund has gone away for people to be able to use, right, for the specific projects that were applied for. But unfortunately, a couple of £1 million for some kind of high street renovation in some area, right? That's not going to cut it for 40 years of deindustrialisation, 40 years of lack of funding, 40 years of centralisation in London and Westminster. That's not going to be fixed with throwing some money at the problem once. Like, one lump sum of levelling up funding is not going to fundamentally change the disparity between the South and the North that we have at the moment. It's going to take a huge sea change in the way we administer funding and how we think about local economies across the country.
They've done since then is the polar opposite of that. You were talking about 60 million may have come to this area through pots of money from levelling up, but over 106 million has been taken away. So they're £40 million worse off.
Taken away what in terms of the local council?
In terms of local council funding. If you added in all the other ways in which money would have been taken away, it would be even more than that. So this Doncaster has been losing money for 14 years, the whole time that this Conservative government has been in place. And if they then give you a little back of the money that they took away, you're not better off. You're still worse off. And to make matters even more offensive to people in places like Doncaster, if you remember in the summer, we had Rishi Sunak standing in a very well-heeled garden down in Tunbridge Wells, bragging about the fact that he had taken monies away from places like Doncaster and funneled it instead into far wealthier parts of the country. This government does not have any interest at all in levelling up this country.
It's also worth pointing out as well, it's not just is the money being taken away from the north and being put into the south, but also so much of the money is going to other countries, right? It's not just not staying in the local communities. It's being taken away from those communities and then being put into the hands of the shareholders of massive multinationals who've ripped apart local economies, right? There's a reason why the Preston model is so popular and was continually popular regardless of who's in control of the Labour Party, right? During those Super Thursday local elections all those years back when Labour lost loads of seats and Angela Rayner got deposed from the positions that she was in, right? All of those years back, you know, back when things were not where they were at the moment, before all of the mess of Boris Johnson. The Preston and Salford councils still saw an increase in vote share despite all of the drops in vote share elsewhere, right? Which just shows you when you have proper community wealth building that keeps wealth from being taken offshore or to other parts of the country. That's what you really need, right? An actual change in the local economy. Again, which a handful of levelling up funding on one bit of renovation is not going to fix.
They've been pulling this country apart. Now let me tell you how we should.
Let me tell you.
I'm sure you'll get Esther a chance to come in. I'm sure you're going to get a chance to come in.
I'll let you come in.
I was just going to say what I think we should be doing. You shouldn't be taking money away from places like Doncaster and giving it to better off parts of the country. What we need to do is open up opportunity to every single part of the country. And one of the ways that we can do that is to get ahead with Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, plans for new towns, investing in the good, clean, new jobs, digital jobs of the future, giving local areas the power they need to choose the skills that they want their local people to be able to trade up in so they can access those jobs. Then they've got the secure incomes. They're not dependent on handouts from Whitehall. And we can give places like Doncaster and other towns across the country back their sense of self-reliance and pride, which this government's taken away from them.
And for the people here in the audience, because this was more...
I think she's less Paris Hilton and more Penny Premier Inn. I mean, we do need more investment. It will be a good thing, right? And this is why I'm glad that Ed Miliband pushed so hard for his locally owned energy production, right? Because that is internal community wealth that's staying within the community. And I think that's a good thing. I just wish it was more than 5% of the Green Prosperity Plan budget.
More of you asked a question about levelling up than anything else. How long do you think, if you were to win the next general election, how long do you think the people here would have to wait before they felt the effects of that?
Well, you know, we've had 14 years of a Conservative government.
I accept that, but just to give people an idea.
It's not going to be overnight. But what Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor...
Within the first Parliament, do you think people should begin to feel the effects of that?
Absolutely within the first Parliament.
Okay.
Absolutely we should.
Esther, you want to come in quickly
Yeah,
before I go
it's
to
just
the audience?
a misrepresentation, because what they were doing, even in, I should say, affluent areas, there will be poor areas, and that investment was going into those areas too, which is important. But what we'd say is we need business investment. We need investment coming in, and that's actually now what we're starting to do. So you're actually saying this year growth in the...
Why would they invest in, like, a dead town with no public services? Like, the state investment has to come first, right? You need to have investment from the state into the public sector in those areas so that the community actually functions properly in the first place, right? So that people have the money to be able to consume.
Economy's flatlining.
In Europe, you're actually saying that the UK now is #1 for investment into new projects. That's coming in, like I said, it's been a tough time with COVID and lockdown, but actually we are getting the economy going, and that is what is important.
OK, lots of hands up. Let's hear from somebody. Man here at the front in the blue shirt and jacket.
Hi, yeah, just to back up the gentleman about levelling up, when is the government going to commit and support the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport?
All right.
Yeah, it'll certainly be one of their 14 new airports.
I will come back to you, answer on that. I'm just going to go round a little bit more first. But I hear you. I will get that question answered. Yes, one in the back in the stripy top.
I just wondered whether it tells us something that the Tory party need a minister for common sense.
What is a Minister for Common Sense, Esther?
Well, you'll have read the reports like me. It seemed that in the media I was dubbed as the Minister of Common Sense, but you actually will know, Fiona, what my role is, which is Minister in the Cabinet Office. It's known as without portfolio, which means that you work across portfolio. So it is about scrutiny, it's about oversight, it's making sure there is delivery for money. Ken Clarke held a position, Peter Mandelson has held a position.
Is the whole common sense thing inaccurate, then?
I'll give you examples of common sense. So actually, I think it's sort of just...
It is interesting that the first thing that was asked about a specific project was opening up Doncaster Airport, which is a public works programme, right? People want there to be a proper economic centre there, which is going to require public investment in public works, right? Until you have that public works there, why would any private business want to invest in that community? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
A popular term. So here's what I guess Rishi, the Prime Minister, has done for common sense. People would have said, delay the ban in purchasing of diesel and petrol cars. You know, those net zero targets are, not practical enough.
He's done that already.
That's
so
right.
why
so
do you
we're
need you?
building upon it because there is more to do. We're talking about here.
How is it common sense to upend the future plans that you've had for businesses for 3 years, that they've already agreed that they want to stick to and are going to make the necessary preparations to be able to modify their business structures for, and then pull the rug out from under them, so much so that even Ford, the Ford Motor Car Company, is writing to the government telling them how their reversal on diesel and petrol car bans is completely unjustified, right? Is a short-sighted change. Right, you managed to actually anger the people making the cars with this change in legislation around diesel and petrol cars, having told them to get ready for not being able to sell any new ones by 2030. And they've made the business preparations already, right? That isn't common sense.
How to get money into areas, how to get investment into areas. You're quite right, Robin Hood Airport, Doncaster Airport, this would be something really important locally. You've got 2 mayors here who should be fighting for it, like Ben Houchen did in Teesside, to get that airport back. So I think getting rid of HS2, that leg there from Birmingham to Manchester, was another bout of common sense to get that billions of pounds into local transport and the transport people want
just
locally.
to be clear,
Except it's not common sense because HS2 is supposed to take the load off of those local transport networks. Also, you can do both, right? You can literally do both. What's not common sense, however, Esther, in my mind, because of course common sense is just a euphemism for what I reckon, right? Don't need to actually look into the subject, don't need to actually look into the evidence, just intuit everything and just say just common sense, right? What I reckon about this particular subject is that HS2 would be much better and much more efficient if it wasn't being done by 1,000 different private contractors, which, when ununionised, had a third the level of safety as Unite the Union have done research on. And if you'd not been pandering to NIMBYs the whole time and spiralled the costs completely ad infinitum by digging tunnels everywhere, not to spoil the view of people who have expensive houses already, maybe you wouldn't have had to scrap it, which again was a manifesto commitment that you've then upended against the will of the electorate, and people didn't want you to scrap it. Incredible. But apparently, this is common sense.
Yeah, just to be clear, because these are things that have happened already.
Yes,
before
that's right.
you were Minister for Common Sense. Now you are Minister for Common Sense. Is that suggesting that the ministers that are already doing their jobs in the various departments in Cabinet, they don't have enough common sense? So you've got to come in and display more common sense? I mean, literally, how does it work?
Yeah, they do have common sense, absolutely.
But just not quite enough.
No, but it is...
Is there a minister for more common sense?
So, but it is bringing in a...
There is so much common sense in the Conservative Party. Not only did the Parliamentary Conservative Party select Liz Truss to be in the final running for the vote to become leader, the membership of the Conservative Party then voted her to become Prime Minister. That went well, didn't it? plenty of common sense all around, right? You'd think they'd have even the common sense to maybe not even give their own membership the opportunity to vote for Liz Truss, right? If there was actual common sense within the Parliamentary Conservative Party, you thought, no, right, we know our membership are going to make the wrong choice here, so let's give them a choice between Sunak and Mordaunt, and maybe we might win the next election.
Scrutiny. As I said, Peter Mandelson held the role for Labour.
He wasn't
You
Prime
had
Minister
10
for common sense.
Thank you for the Prime Slab grant, Sloan. Thank you for throwing your Bezos bucks my way this month.
That's right, because it has been given by yourself as well as a sort of a fun name, because people say, do politicians listen to what people need? Are they looking at those net zero targets? Actually, should we have delayed them because the infrastructure wasn't there? People would have been pushed into poverty. Labour wants to go even quicker with the net zero targets, as did the Lib Dem. So it is working on...
There's no evidence that net zero would have pushed people into poverty. Most of the poverty at the moment, right, in terms of in-work poverty as well, is coming from your failure on energy policy, which is a failure of a lack of decarbonisation.
Behalf of the people to bring pragmatism into politics.
I can understand, though, how being presented with a Minister of Common Sense is quite irksome. It does seem a bit irksome. All I can imagine in my head is that your office is beside the Minister of Funny Walks. It just seems... It's on that sort of level. It's,
No, you see, I think...
I mean, she's not wrong. Like, she's not wrong about it essentially being a Minister for Funny Walks, right? They've lost the plot so much, and they have no idea what they're doing to the extent to which they're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Because they can make up ministerial positions for whatever they want. So why not have a Minister of Common Sense? Fuck it.
As other people have held this role, it is important, because sometimes also government works in silos. You'll have individual departments working on things, and you need it that somebody can go across those departments, work with those departments. We were talking about this before, and you said how important that was, Lady.
Esther, I appreciate it. Listen, we've asked that question. We must let you answer, but I'm going to drag us back to levelling up. So we got slightly sidetracked by that. And we've asked your question about we've had an answer about the airport. You man there in the glass in the dark jacket.
We in the north feel like the forgotten souls. In the last 12 months, we've lost our airport here. We've had a failed bid for a hospital. We've had failed British Rail headquarters.
Looking forward to those 40 hospitals, though, mate. Looking forward to them coming right around the corner. Just as Boris Johnson promised you.
Bid go. 1,635 businesses failed last year, which was up 14.3% from the previous year. Half the town's empty. The hotels are all full of immigrants. It's a no-go area at times. And the divide between the north and south with levelling up it's a massive gap.
And can I ask you, do you think it is just a question of money coming from government, or do you think there's something else?
It's money from government, but it's also when councils receive money, how they distribute it and what they prioritise.
OK. Andrew?
I think the people of Doncaster are in a better position to tell us about levelling up than a panel that's come up from London. You're the people that live in and from what I see, or what I've just heard, you're not happy. And you have every right to be not happy. I think levelling up was a wonderful idea. It's just a pity it was never implemented. Every country has regional disparities. Italy, Germany, France.
Whoa, Andrew, levelling up was state funding. It was state intervention into the economy. That's communism.
Ours are wider than most. And if we could reduce them, we would add over 100 billion to British GDP. Everybody would benefit. Doncaster would benefit. Durham would benefit. The South would benefit. And there's so much that could have been done. And I don't know, Esther, that you could point to one metric that would show that levelling up has narrowed the gap between the North and the South. I don't know of one metric in which the North has benefited and come closer to the prosperity of the South. As a country, our wealth...
In fact, it's got worse, right? It's literally gotten worse. I mean, we also saw those stats from the Financial Times showing that outside of London, the standard of living is lower than in Mississippi.
And power is overwhelmingly concentrated in the south, and it's to all of our disadvantages that that should be the case. And there was so much that could have been done. For a start, the government could have designated 20 towns in the north, like Doncaster, and poured millions into them to regenerate the city centres again, to bring them back to life. The gentleman who asked the question mentioned how it was dead. It can be done. It's been done, funnily enough, in the south. Go down Marylebone High Street in London. It's totally regenerated, but not in Doncaster, not the Doncaster I came through. That could have been done. Instead of building HS2, you could have poured billions into proper transport links east and west.
Or just do both. Again, like, part of the reason for HS2 is to take the strain off of local rail lines as well. In fact, the fact that HS2 is being scrapped from Birmingham to Manchester, but not from London to Birmingham, just shows you how much more important the South is to the Conservative Party and the Westminster elite in general, and the fact that we're not going to cancel all of HS2, just the bit that actually goes to the north, right?
Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool, a single Labour conurbation with a labour force or a population of 10 million, which is the size of London. You're up there if you do that.
So that actually is what Rishi is now doing, which is important.
You've been in power for 4 years. How much do you need?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Let me just continue.
But Rishi
you could
hasn't
have
been.
designated the North has some of the finest universities in Europe. They could have been designated to work together as clusters for modern technology. There is 150,000, 200,000 actually now, shortage of people with STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The government could have designated elite STEM schools in every major northern town and city and given the young people of this region a real chance in the future of this world, a world-class education, German standards of engineering education. That would have brought up the living standards. There's so many things that could have been done that would have made a difference. And frankly, Esther, you, government, has done nothing.
I'm agreeing with Andrew Neil. It's things have gone bad, right? I mean, things haven't gone bad. What's happened is the Conservative Party have been so rubbish at the basic aspects of governance that even the right wing think they're not investing enough in public services. Even the right wing think that the government isn't engaging in enough interventionist economics, right? There's like all that stuff, that segment I uploaded today about Richard Tice and wanting more council housing, right? They know that there needs to be some state funding somewhere. Boris Johnson knew there needs to be state funding from somewhere, right? Boris Johnson knew people didn't want austerity governance. And that's what we've been given by Truss and Sunak.
In the north and in this area, going without levelling up is not anything new. And it's not just the Tory government that's failed to do that. It's previous Labour governments that have failed to do that. And wherever you go in this area, Doncaster, Sheffield, Rotherham, wherever you go, there are high streets that are crying out for money. When will somebody get real? Future governments get...
And again, this is why the red wall was always going to fall. This is why the red wall was always trending blue until 2017. And that's because, yeah, Labour governments have failed. Labour councils have failed, right? Tony Blair accelerated deindustrialisation. He accelerated the gap between the north and the south. He accelerated the financialisation of this country and the deaths of local economies in the north of the state and all of these kind of communities. And the entrenchment of neoliberal values, right? Of course, they were going to move away from the Labour Party until somebody came along and said, right, maybe we should actually be investing in these places for once.
Real and sort this out.
Well,
because
I will say the Northern Powerhouse, and I will agree with everything that Andrew said there, is vital. I am actually from... No, listen, I am from...
You should say your government doesn't know anything about it.
No, hang on a sec. I am from the North, and I've always fought for the Northern Powerhouse. My husband is from Doncaster. I know this area very well. And I think that connection across the north was what I've been fighting for 7 years, but they were determined to do the south to the north. No, this is the start of that connection across the north, and those transport links will be vital to get that northern powerhouse.
Panel members, Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a politician, I'm a comedian, which sometimes gets blurred, but... and my experience of coming up to Doncaster and areas around here, you know, I live in the south, and I come up to go on tours and travel around and do shows, and I find as soon as I get up to this part of the world, my heart goes out to you, how difficult it is to get anywhere. And it's a basic human right to be able to live in one place and work in another, to commute to a job, to generate wealth across the whole region, as we are saying. And I really do feel for you. But it's been going on for years and years and years and years. I mean, sometimes when I'm up in Yorkshire, I'm getting on a train, I'm like, is this a train or is it a bus that thinks it's a train? It is so confusing. And it's if you had that ability to commute, to spread the wealth out, it would make such a huge difference to this part of the world.
Leila?
I mean, commuting is something that would be better if it was more efficient with better public transport. But actually, the reality is that there is too much commuting, right? People have to commute from satellite towns into the larger cities like Sheffield and Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool, etc., because all of the local economies, right, the market towns, the old mining communities, all of the industrial towns, all of the jobs have gone. There are literally no jobs left in any of these satellite towns. If you want to get a job, right, you have to go to one of the population centres, which is why there's been demographic change in all of these northern constituencies. This is why, because all of the young people, in the massive rush to get them to university under Blair, right, why would they move back to Accrington? Why would they move back to Doncaster? Why would they move back to Burnley? Why would they move back to Bolton? Why would they move back to any of these places when all of the jobs have been hollowed out as we've centralised around the high-tech industries of the future in the cities like Manchester and Leeds and in Sheffield and in Liverpool? And they stay in these large population centres. And this is the massive demographic shift that we've seen, which helps all of these red wall seats turn blue. The actual working population left to go to places where there were actual jobs available. And that's the consequence of deindustrialisation. It's the consequence of over-financialisation, which is the legacy of Thatcherism, the legacy of Blairism, the continual legacy of the differential between our towns and our cities, between the north and the south.
I'm from Oxfordshire, but that doesn't mean that because you're from the south, it's not in our interests that the north isn't thriving. Because businesses that start in places like Oxford can't stay there. We don't have enough space for the labs or whatever, the spin-outs, and very often they will come here. And what I think makes me so upset is the reason I got into politics in the first place, I was a teacher before I was an MP, is that when I visit places in my area and ask people where they're from, sometimes they are from places like Doncaster, and ask them why did they go, and they said there just wasn't the opportunity here. They wanted to stay. They wanted to stay and raise their children near their grandparents. They wanted to stay in their community. But when it came to that job that was going to get them on the ladder and get them ahead in life, they couldn't find it here.
So what's the Lib Dem policy on this?
So, well,
I mean, that, again, literally what I was just saying about deindustrialisation. Exactly what I was saying. The jobs have all gone. They've migrated to the population centres. It's super simple. And it had profound effects economically, politically, socially. And that this is another reason for this large gap between ideologies of young people and older people, right? Because they're all in different communities. And this is why the Preston model has been a success. It's kept the wealth, it's kept the jobs, it's kept the community around the community wealth building that they've created to keep the wealth inside Preston, rather than being frittered away into the pockets of the shareholders of the multinationals that have carved up the rest of the country.
What we have always spoken about is finding a way to get local communities the money and the power that they need to be able to do this work. Local government has been consistently underfunded over the last 10 years. I'm a great believer that if you vote for a local council, actually you...
Now, I have a lot of time for Layla Moran, but yeah, councils have had their budget slashed over the last 10 years. Would you like to tell me, Layla, which party was a coalition party of the government in 2013 during the period at which the council budgets got slashed the most, right? Would you like to tell me which political party were the ones who enabled the Conservatives to strip back all of those council budgets? Do you want to hazard a guess at which party that might be? You're not going to like the answer, Layla.
You guys and your councillors know very well how to revitalise your high street. What works for you is not going to work for Abingdon, near me. We've got to make sure that local communities are given that power, and that power is evenly distributed. And examples of that is, for example, HS2. I think, actually, it was a mistake to cut it, but actually I would have started in the north and gone south. You start the investment there, you don't stop it.
Okay. Let me just say a couple of points for the audience want to move on.
I mean, again, she's not wrong. She's not wrong. It just goes against basically everything that she's campaigned for whilst the Lib Dems were in government, and also locally as well, right? Like, Layla Moran is notorious for somebody who blocks things like new housing proposals, despite the fact that the Lib Dems are running on a council house building platform, although they did vote to scrap housing targets during their conference, which is quite amusing to me. But, you know, like, of course, maybe we do want to revitalise businesses in these areas, but if people don't have houses to live in because NIMBYs have blocked all the construction, which is what most Lib Dem councils do, then there's going to be no investment either way. So, you know, you need to get a more coherent platform here, Layla, rather than just say what you think people want to hear.
Woman at the very back in the glasses.
There's this notion of brain drain that we're taught very early on. I was taught in GCSE geography that we are to, or we're expected to, if you're educated and want to achieve what is deemed as something, you are to move out of your hometown. I love it here. I want to stay here. I don't want to be pitied. I don't want it to, oh, when I come up here, oh, is this, I want it to be thriving. I'm educated, I'm clever, and I care about this place. And there are so many like me. I don't want to be a statistic that is pitied or expected to move down south. I don't want to.
Right. Okay. The man here in the glass and dark sweater.
Right. So for me, levelling up starts at the local area. We've had South Yorkshire Mayor Oliver Coppard, who's now got 1.455 billion from City Regional Transport Settlement Fund, and the first thing he did was went out and bought some more trams, £500 million. And what we have seen now is a localised version of trickle-down economics. Spend in Sheffield goes down to Doncaster. And what we've had now is they claim what powers, and then they go in the Parliament, Secretary of State, Mark Harper, he says, yes, we've met with Oliver Coppard. Oliver Coppard on Radio Sheffield says, no, we haven't. So the three things that really affect us are the funding element. Oliver keeps saying, I can't extract this funding. It's 2027 for Crest. And then we've got the localised issue in transport infrastructure, where Peel have been allowed to take an airport twice, once in Teesside, once in Doncaster. And then we've got devolution isn't working for us. The two mayors, Oliver Coppard and Ros Jones, are not giving us the money. They prefer to spend it on a business case that is returning lower than HS2, and that's the trams.
Okay, well, obviously they're not here to defend themselves, but I hear what you have to say. I'm going to move on.
There's also a case where when we're having these larger metro areas, right, there's going to be larger mayoralties moving forward, aren't there? Hence why you've got the new Northeast one with the whole Jamie Driscoll saga, which is actually probably going to leave less room for investment in smaller areas because you'd want to get the biggest return on investment, which you'd get more of if it's in the bigger areas, which again, this kind of capitalisation and marketisation fails small areas. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.